Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're having Sbarro, I think that's how you pronounce it. I never know how to pronounce it. Pizza. We got pepperoni, and then I made myself a cucumber, tomato, and feta cheese salad with some pepper on top, and it has Italian dressing on it. I have just a lemon water to drink. I'm still drinking 1 gallon a day.
I'm drinking this La Croix. It's naturally flavored.
It's hibiscus flavor. It's actually pretty good.
What's hibiscus?
It's like a type of flower, I think.
Oh.
I'm not really sure. Can you move the mic a little bit closer?
Mm-hmm. Like that?
Yeah, that should work. Alright, I'm gonna put my salad right here so you guys can see it. This New York style pizza.
They got some pretty big slices.
Mm-hmm. So big you gotta fold them.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, you could hold them, but...
Mm-hmm. This is the pizza you get at the mall. Mm. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. If you guys are new here, please consider subscribing to become an A-lister. You just have to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, leave me a comment, and rate this video. They're so good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I'm also doing a true crime today, but we're gonna eat first, and then when Tony's done eating, he's gonna get out of the frame, and I will probably put a timestamp, if I remember, in the comment section so you guys can skip to it if you don't like the eating part. So this video might be a little bit longer than normal.
Mm-hmm.
Today's true crime is going to be about a father and son who went on a crime spree. And the father his name is Joseph Callinger, and he was known as the shoemaker killer, or serial killer. Do you want any Parmesan?
No thanks.
They gave us crushed pepper and Parmesan. I'm going to add some crushed pepper. Give it a little bit. Ooh, that was kind of a lot. Give it a little bit of some spice. It's blurred. It's focusing on our faces.
I know.
Good?
I know.
I gave you your napkin, right?
Mm-mm.
I didn't? I thought I passed it to you. Oh, here. Tony and I are hungry because we did a hike this morning.
Mm-hmm. Oh no. No. It's really greasy.
Are you okay?
No.
He's struggling.
Okay. What?
It's so big, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. We went on a nice hike this morning. It's pretty chilly, pretty foggy out. Let me know what you guys did over the weekend.
It's dripping.
Try and eat it over here. Can you sit up taller? You're kind of slouchy.
Mm-hmm.
So this weekend on Saturday, Sophia had her volleyball tournament. And for those of you that follow me on Snapchat, you guys saw that she won her bracket. She won her pool play, and then she won her bracket play. So they were the champions. And I think that I'm pretty sure that because they were the champions of this tournament, they'll play in the like final championship game at the end of the season. So that was exciting.
The drive wasn't.
It wasn't too bad. It was like driving to the beach. It was 2 hours away.
In a car. It seemed way longer than 2 hours.
I think it's because you're not excited about going
Yeah.
to her games.
Mm-hmm. Those 2 slices were big. I think I'm done. That filled me up.
Good.
Those are some big slices.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are you done?
Yeah.
You don't want to say anything to the people?
Have a good day.
All right. Have a good day, guys.
Tony out.
All right. So I will move over. It is so refreshing. So good. I didn't mean to pour that much feta cheese out. Okay. I got my notes. Okay, guys, so today's true crime is going to be the case of the shoemaker killer, the serial killer. His name is Joseph Callinger. Joseph Callinger was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1935. He was born to his parents who ended up giving him up for adoption. What happened was his father left his mom, and his mom wasn't able to take care of him on her own. She didn't have enough funds, so she ended up putting him up for adoption. And a couple years later, he was adopted by an Austrian couple who immigrated to the United States, and this home was not the best fit for him at all. If you guys follow serial killers, one common thing that is found in serial killers is that they were abused as a child. And not just like any type of like spankings or anything, like severely abused. So, as a child, he had to endure beatings. He would be locked in closets, forced to eat his own excrements. He was starved. Just horrible things. He would be burned. One time, he asked his mom if he could go on a school field trip to the zoo, and she said no, but he was adamant about going, and she ended up hitting him over the head with a hammer, causing him to bleed. Just horrible things that no kid should go through. So, as he got older, he started to rebel. He became rebellious. He would threaten people with knives. He would steal from his parents. He would lie. And he became obsessed with fire. And in interviews, he says that as a child, he remembers being, like hearing voices to tell him to do these bad things. And that was just the beginning of him developing a mental disorder. So at the age of 17, he moved out of his parents' house. His adopted father, he owned a shoemaking business. He was the local cobbler. He had his own business. And Joseph was also forced to work in his father's business. Instead of being able to play with the kids, Joseph never learned how to ride a bike. He was very isolated. So that alone it affected his mental ability. He wasn't able to play with the neighbor kids. He did not have a normal childhood at all. So by the age of 17, he moved out from his parents' house. He married his girlfriend, who he met at the age of 15, and he continued to work at his adoptive father's shoe mill. Him and his wife, they had 2 kids together, and after a few years, his wife left him because of the domestic violence and abuse she endured at the hands of Joseph Callinger. So she left him, and when she left him, Joseph started behaving erratically. He was hallucinating. He would lose his appetite, and he ended up being admitted into a mental hospital. And the doctors just thought it was, prolonged stress of the divorce and everything. He would attempt to take his own life. He was getting severe headaches. And so eventually he was able to remarry. And he had 5 kids. He had 5 more kids with his second wife. At this time, he ended up taking over his father's business. He became an expert at shoemaking. He was doing really well. Business was booming. Business was booming, and people would look for his services because he was just that good. It wasn't too long after that he started developing these delusional ideas. He thought that the heel of the foot is the key to a healthy brain. So he thought that if he could perfect his heel of his shoe, that he would be able to control his brain and then in turn control his behavior. Joseph Callinger also started hallucinating. He thought that he could hear the voice of God and that God was giving him these divine orders. And those divine orders were to start a mission to save the world by perfecting his shoe, the heel of the shoe. Because then by perfecting the heel of the shoe, he thought it would help create a healthy brain, and then, the world would be solved. Nobody would have these like crazy delusions that he was getting. Nobody would behave erratically. He also somehow convinced himself that he had telepathic powers. And so to prove his theory, he tested it on hamsters. And he was trying to increase their intelligence by telepathy. Well, when the hamsters weren't doing anything, he blamed it on the fact that they were just ignoring him. And so he would punish them. And he punished them by making them run on the little spinny wheel until they would get exhausted and eventually die. So, also at this time, Joseph began to feel like he was losing control of his kids. So he began punishing the same way that his mom and dad did. By 1972, his kids ended up going to the police about the child abuse because, let me get this out of my face, because Joseph had took in a hot iron and branded his daughter on the thigh for misbehaving. So after that incident, they went to the police, and then a week later, Joseph was arrested on child abuse charges. Once he was arrested, he was sent to psychiatric evaluation to see if he was fit to stand trial. And at that evaluation, they found that he had a low IQ. I believe his score was like 82. And they also found that they also diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. After the evaluation, it was found that he was mentally able to stand trial. So they went to trial. He was convicted and he was put in prison. But once his kids found out that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, I think they felt bad for him because they ended up recanting the child abuse allegations, and the judge overturned the conviction, and Joseph was released under the supervision. He had to have supervision by family. So in 1974, Joseph was hallucinating constantly. He was saying that he was getting divine orders from God, and that this time the divine orders were to murder young boys and cut off their genitals. But Joseph felt like he needed help to be able to accomplish this, so he went to his 13-year-old son, Michael, and told Michael, hey, I have these orders from God, they're divine, we need to do this. And Michael, being young and impressionable and wanting to help his dad, gladly agreed. And then shortly after, a Puerto Rican boy goes missing. He was 10 years old, and his name was Jose Colazo. Jose Colazo was their first victim. He was lured to an abandoned factory where he was tortured and his genitals were cut off. And then he was eventually strangled to death. After that, Joseph's next victim was his own son. Not Michael, but a younger son. And he thought that if he could murder his own son, he would be able to murder the whole world. So after multiple attempts, I think the first attempt was to try to get his son to back off of a cliff backwards. It didn't work, but eventually after the third try, Joseph and Michael were able to kill their own flesh and blood. And they ended up doing this by drowning him and then leaving his body at a demolition site, later to be found by police. And Police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Joseph in the murder, but they had enough suspicion to know that it was him, but they just didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. So that left Joseph, free to do whatever he wants, whatever he thought these divine orders from God were. So Joseph and Michael were able to continue to commit these crimes, but they knew that they had to be out of state, out of town. So they went to New Jersey, and in November 1974, they broke into one home. Nobody was there. And on that same day, they broke into a second home that belonged to Joan Carty. They tied her to the bed and they committed a crime. I can't say on YouTube, but I'm sure you can imagine what that is. And then less than 2 weeks later, they went back to Pennsylvania. And they broke into a home where 5 women were playing a game of cards. They took them hostage. They robbed them. I think they took like $20,000 in cash. They took jewelry. And then they also mutilated one of the women's breasts. And then after that, they traveled to Maryland. And this is all within the same month. So they traveled to Maryland where they held Pamela Jaski at gunpoint, and they forced her to perform inappropriate acts on Joseph, and this was by gunpoint. And then by January 6th, they were back in New Jersey, and they committed the same acts on a woman by the name of Mary Rudolph, and that was in her own home as well. So how they would either break into the home, they would force their way in, but Joseph used Michael as a way to get into these women's homes. They would pretend to be salesmen, and, they would look at Joseph and Michael and think, oh, that's his son. They're, they can be trusted. But once they were in their homes, they were able to take over. So eventually, on January 8th, 1975, Joseph forced his way into a home in Leonia, New Jersey. What happened was they walked up to the door, and Joseph pretended to be a salesman, and Joseph had also asked the lady who went by the name of Dee Dee Romaine, and asked if there was anybody else in the home. And she said, oh, it's just my grandmother who's ill. She's incapable of taking care of herself, and that's why she was at the home, and her 3-year-old son. And Dee Dee thought that was kind of suspicious. She felt something wasn't right. So she told them to go away. And after she told him to do that, Joseph forced his way into the house. And that's where he made his son Michael go make sure that her grandmother, was in fact ill and not able to do anything. And Michael confirmed that. And then after that, Joseph took Dee Dee and her 3-year-old son Robert. They made them strip. They bound them to a bed in the upstairs room. And they took Dee Dee's jewelry. Soon after they bound and gagged them to a bed, Dee Dee's sister comes home. Her name is Randy. She showed up at the house, and she was also taken hostage in the same way. She was bound and gagged. And Joseph then demanded money from them. And that's when Randy told Joseph that more people were on their way. But Joseph was ready for them. So a short time later, Edwina, who is Dee Dee's and Randy's mom, she shows up along with their other sister, Retta. Their mom's name is Edwina, and their sister Retta, and then Retta's boyfriend, whose name is Frank. So all 3 of them showed up, and Joseph was able to take them hostage as well. So Joseph carried a gun and a knife on him, and that's how he was able to force them to do what Joseph needed them to do. So then after everybody was, tied up and gagged, they searched the house for any valuables, any cash. And not too long later, they heard a knock on the door. And at the door was 21-year-old Maria, who was a nurse. And she went to the house to go help take care of their grandmother. Joseph was also able to take Maria hostage. But this time, instead of taking her upstairs, he took Maria downstairs to the basement. And he also took Frank along with him. But once they were down in the basement, Joseph threatened Frank and said, you know, you better not try and get away. And then right after that, he slit Maria's throat. And Maria bled to her death. At this same time, when Joseph was down in the basement, Edwina, she was able to crawl her way out the front door and start screaming for help. And so once this was happening, Michael, his son, came down to the basement and told Joseph, hey, somebody's on their way. So they fled the house. They took their weapons. They left to go home. They took the city bus to go back home to Pennsylvania. And along the way, they had gotten rid of their weapons, and they also got rid of a bloody t-shirt. Police were able to find the weapons and the t-shirt, and then they also had witness sketches. They also had witnesses of what the Joseph and Michael looked like, and they also had sketches of what Joseph and Michael, and they matched the sketches and the descriptions perfectly. And so they became under police suspicion. And then eventually on January 17th, 1975, both Michael and Joseph were arrested. One of Joseph's other sons was arrested in suspicion, but after interviewing him, they realized that he wasn't the son that was helping Joseph. So he was let go, and then just Joseph and Michael were in custody. And they were being arrested on charges of kidnapping, burglary, the R word, and murder. So once Joseph was in custody, he started behaving erratically. He was claiming to be a butterfly who had been alive for 1,000 years, and he had a mission from God, and he would also attempt to take his own life multiple times. Even though he was schizophrenic and diagnosed as being schizophrenic, doctors declared him fit to stand trial. So they go to trial. He ended up having 2 trials. The first trial was for the burglary, the lesser charges. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced to 30 to 80 years prison. Now, during the second trial, this was for the murder of his son, Jose Calaza, and Maria, the nurse. Joseph was still showing erratic behavior, and his behavior had gotten much worse, so much that he would be disruptive during trial, and he had to be taken out of the courtroom. Everybody in that courtroom thought he was just putting on an act to try and claim insanity. Even though he was pleading guilty, they thought that he was just trying to act insane, when in actuality it was just schizophrenia. Joseph Callinger was found guilty on October 14th, 1976, on the charges of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. A few years later, because of his erratic behavior and multiple attempts to take his own life, including trying to set himself on fire, he was committed to a mental hospital. And he was there. He would give interviews there. He would also use his shoemaker skills to fix the shoes of inmates. And that's what he did until he passed away in March of 1996. He had a seizure and he died due to heart failure. He was 60 years old. So Michael Callinger, during trial, he was found to be under the influence of his father, Joseph Callinger, and he was sentenced to the age of 21 to a youth correctional facility. Michael served his full sentence. He ended up getting out of prison, moving to a whole new state, changing his name, and he hasn't been heard or seen from since. So yeah, that's it. That's all the information I have. The only thing I have an issue with is knowing that Michael Callinger is still out there, and who knows if the crimes that he committed with his dad had an effect on him. We know that schizophrenia can be genetic, or it is genetic. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's scary to think that he's out there roaming the streets, or maybe he's in prison. Maybe he ended up still having, living a life of crime. Who knows? I don't know. I didn't do a whole lot of research to see if anybody has found Michael Callinger and what he goes by now, where he's living. I don't know. That would be interesting. If you guys know, you guys can leave it in the comments down below. But yeah, this case was really just kind of crazy. A part of me almost feels sad because Joseph had this mental disability and he wasn't getting the help that he needed. And who knows, if he was on medication and getting the help that he needed, possibly none of these crimes could have happened. Because we all know, like, there are many people out there who are schizophrenic that don't commit murders, you know, and the abuse and everything that Joseph went through, it can only create, you know, this bad person. This, you know, they're abused, they have this mental disability on top of it, and it's just crazy. There are interviews that you guys can see on YouTube, and you guys can see how he behaves. He made comments to people that were interviewing him saying that if he was still out, he would still commit murders. Like, he has tried to hurt many people, being institutionalized where he's at. He doesn't think he would ever stop killing, which is really scary. So I don't know, maybe even with medication, Joseph Callinger would probably still commit these crimes, but who knows? I don't know. Yeah, leave me your guys' thoughts and opinions on this case. If you guys have more information, we can talk about it down below. If there's anything that I missed that you guys think is important to this case, go ahead and leave that down below. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.